time now for the markets with Leighton, and you say hardwood sawtimber prices have easily outperformed pine for the last 7 to 8 years?
That's right, and we're going to have more on all the forestry products markets coming up. Also ahead in our segment, we begin the month of August. A shift in the supply picture on cattle looks to be in the future. Corn prices may be stuck where they are for a while, and lower prices are possible in soybeans. New since our last production, the USDA's cattle on feed and cattle inventory numbers. The number of cattle and calves in the nation's feedlots is up 2% from a year ago. Placements on to feed were up too, not as much, up only 1%. Meanwhile, marketings hit a new all-time low for the month. They dropped 5%. And the nation's inventory of cattle showed a 2% increase from 1 year ago. Traders say this last figure points to some herd expansion in the U.S. cattle business. Analyst Mark Gold describes the latest on-feed report as pretty bearish. He says overall we are seeing a shift in the supply picture on cattle now, and he cautions producers there's a tremendous amount of risk in the market. They need to protect the downside.
We've seen this fundamental shift now in the supply. We know demand has been tight, and we know demand with the stock market breaking 500-600 points in just a week is a little iffy out here. We've seen the wholesale beef prices come down. This is a time, guys, where you're still at relatively high prices that you need to be protecting the downside with some put options. Spend that money and protect the downside.
Time to break for a trivia quiz here on Farm Week. Our topic this week, the beef sector. And here is the quiz question. How many quarter-pound hamburgers can be made from the ground beef of a single steer? Here are the possible answers. A, 720, B, 875, C, 969, or D, 1,000 hamburgers. You'll find out which one is correct in a few more minutes. We move into row crops and timber now in the second half of the markets. We begin with corn. Wells Fargo ag economist Michael Swanson says bluntly, this market is stuck at $4 to $4.50 for a while. He thinks there is increased pressure from the global marketplace at play. Swanson also told Brownfield Ag News that $4 corn creates tighter margins and that farmers will have to tighten their belts in some cases to break even over the next couple of years. The soybean market, meanwhile, remains under significant pressure as traders remain focused on improving weather conditions in some other parts of the country. Analysts say look for bean prices to remain volatile as we approach and get into August and the USDA's next report. The best advice from the pit, be ready to take advantage of any upswing in the oilseed market.
We've had a little bit of Chinese demand in this market the last week, but again, we're down so significantly from a year ago exports. And the Argentinians still have grain to sell. The Brazilians are still in the market. The competition has been intense. So we've got a problem in the bean market. The last time I was on this show, we talked about buying calls on June 1st. They had a nice run in corn, wheat, and beans, and we were able to take advantage of that. The funds were short. They've gone from short to long in all three commodities. Now I think they're probably pretty close back to even in the wheat and even in the beans. But if they want to get short in this next week or so, we can still see lower prices. Again, it may give us an opportunity again on the downside before the report, maybe get a bump after the report.
We end in forestry products, where it's no secret hardwood sawtimber prices have outperformed pine for some time now. Associate Extension Professor James Henderson says U.S. housing starts are one area to watch before we see pine sawtimber moving in the right direction. James, what would the housing market, housing starts in particular, what would they have to do in order to see movement in the sawtimber prices for pine?
Typically, the level where we start to see some movement in sawtimber prices is around about 1.5 million units annually. That's the long-term historical average, about 1.5, and that's usually where we see sawtimber prices respond.
Now, the hardwood sawtimber prices, they have basically outperformed pine sawtimber since the recession, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Hardwood sawtimber prices around 2007 statewide were about $22 a ton. And over a 6-year period, we've seen an 80% increase in mixed hardwood sawtimber prices to about $40 a ton.
Now, pulpwood, of course, is another commodity when you talk about forest products, and since an international paper mill in Cortland, Alabama, right across the state line, closed, those prices have really lagged and suffered.
Yeah. Pine pulpwood prices are very different in northern Mississippi as compared to southern Mississippi, and we can point to the closure of the IP mill in Cortland as the primary culprit in that. In the second quarter of 2013, North Mississippi pine pulpwood averaged around $12.79 per ton. Just 2 years later, it's fallen to about $5.24 a ton. Now compare that with South Mississippi. Over that same 2-year period, the prices have remained virtually unchanged, around $10 per ton. So the closure of that IP mill had a big impact on the pulpwood markets in North Mississippi.
And basically that means higher transportation cost when it comes to getting the pulpwood somewhere where it can be processed.
That was one of the largest paper mills in the U.S. And its closure really devastated that market. And there's certainly a need for more markets, more competition in North Mississippi.
Back to trivia now to wrap things up in the markets for this week. The right answer is A. You can make 720 hamburgers from a single steer.